I can't lose this job.
Your job is to write the truth.
I did.
The truth is, I'm the hero here, not you.
Bummer. You're in the doghouse now, dude.
Coming, honey. When it comes to Peter Parker's love life, you never know what you're gonna get. But anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another very exciting Marvel Spider-Man 3 related video. And today's video is going to be an insanely special one because I am once again joined by another very special guest who you have seen occur several times on my channel with the one and only Irogen, who you should definitely go and subscribe on his channel because we did do another collaboration talking about Marvel Spider-Man 3 over there, about where the story could go in Marvel Spider-Man 3. But now, we are going to be talking in depth about how the gameplay could be evolving within this game based on what we have already seen within Insomniac's previous Spider-Man titles. Jake, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on, Evan. I'm a huge fan of the gameplay that Insomniac has integrated into their Spider-Man games, and it's been incredible to watch it evolve over the course of their series. And I'm so excited today to talk about where we could see it going in their third and potentially final entry of the series.
And while Jake and I love every single one of the Spider-Man games Insomniac have already made, there still is room for improvement in order to make the next experience within this franchise even bigger and better than what they've already previously established. In this case, we really have three core pillars to talk about what we can expect within the gameplay possibilities of Marvel's Spider-Man 3, starting with the game's combat system. So based on what we've already seen Insomniac incorporate into Marvel's Spider-Man 2 in terms of stepping up the game's combat system, we did see a lot of replications of what Insomniac already added into Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, that of which being the power wheel, which is pretty much when you press the L1 button and press any of the shape buttons to execute a special move for either of Miles and now Peter's movesets, especially when he was wearing either the red suit with the spider arms or the black suit with the symbiote, as well as Miles's evolved Venom powers. And alongside of that, we also have the inclusion of the fast-paced wall kick combo, which you can execute when an enemy is closer to a wall, different types of gadget variations, and last but not least is the L3R3 special move that you can execute as either Peter or Miles with the symbiote surge ability or Miles's super mega venom blast. But given all these combat techniques that we do see Peter and Miles have already in Marvel Spider-Man 2, the next question is how exactly Insomniac is going to improve upon the combat within the next game. So for you, Jake, how do you think Insomniac will step up the combat in Marvel Spider-Man 3?
It's a really great question because we've seen a lot of improvements, as you said, between each entry. In the first game, Peter had a lot of gadgets, and that complements that game's story really well, where he was working with Otto Octavius. Miles Morales, it was more built around abilities and his Venom powers. And then in Spider-Man 2, we got a faster-paced combat system where the gadgets were based on quick fire mechanics rather than a gadget wheel. And for some, that was a little frustrating because for those who enjoyed playing the game in a more tactical way, where you selected the gadget you wanted to use and planned out your approach, that wasn't as much of an option anymore. And while Brian Intihar has made it clear that he doesn't really want there to be automatic win buttons and he doesn't want to make the combat too simple, there is a balance of the power dynamic. And when you go up against regular thugs, sometimes it is fun to feel like you just go in, you've planned your approach with specific gadgets, and you're able to effectively and quickly take them down. Another area that we saw get a little bit less refinement in Spider-Man 2 was the stealth. We didn't see as many opportunities for a stealthy approach. And while you could elect to perform stealth if you wanted to, we didn't see as many instances where a hostage was being held, or where there was a circumstance where failing to be stealthy would result in a fail state of the game and need you to retry the objective. Personally, for Spider-Man 3, I think they could do many evolutions, both with just the main combat, where maybe we could get wall combat. Maybe you have enemies that stick to walls as well that you get to fight on the wall. We could see an improvement with finishers, perhaps, where maybe we get dual finishers, we could see a dual play system where we can switch between Peter, Miles, and potentially Silk or Venom on the fly as we fight alongside them. Even in the Batman Arkham games, we saw an interesting balance where the gadgets would often show up in a gadget wheel or gadget selection tool when you were using them for stealth encounters or to get past obstacles in the environment or puzzles. Whereas in free flow combat encounters, you had quick-fire gadgets as to not slow down the pace of combat. In Spider-Man 3, I'd be interested in seeing a similar approach, where in stealthy encounters or encounters where you have to get past a puzzle with a gadget, we get to act as more of a tactician, whereas in these fast-paced encounters, we get to utilize quick-fire abilities so that the pace of the fight can remain at a high-octane pace the whole way through.
I completely agree with everything you're saying, Jake, and I also think that the addition of the gadgets is so crucial for not only gameplay purposes with combat, but also showcasing the intellectuality that both Peter and Miles have individually, which is why it was so intriguing to see the variety of gadgets that Peter had in his own game and the different gadgets that Miles had in his game. And in Marvel's Spider-Man 2, both Peter and Miles share the exact same gadgets, which does make sense narratively considering that they are both sharing the exact same tech with one another, but I do think being able to possibly choose which gadgets you want Peter and Miles to have, or completely different gadgets from their own respective games, would add more player customization and individuality between both of our main playable characters. I also think having the addition of finishers for the gadgets would also add a completely new twist for the game's combat system, similar to what we already saw in Batman Arkham Knight, where each of Batman's individual gadgets did get a finisher move if you did build up your combo meter in the amount required. And I could easily see the same thing happening here with Peter and Miles' gadgets when taking out groups and multiple enemies if you are surrounded by a horde of foes.
Another thing that I'd be interested in seeing is a return of dual boss fights. We saw in Spider-Man 1 combat encounters where we'd get to go up against Electro and Vulture at the same time, or Rhino and Scorpion. Insomniac hadn't quite figured out boss fights yet. Most of those boss fights felt a little bit underwhelming, but in Spider-Man 2 we saw a huge upgrade. The Lizard boss fight, for example, is a multi-stage fight where it starts in the sewers and then you're swinging and chasing him through the city, and then you end up on a rooftop and then you're back in the sewers, and it's this really intense sequence with Kurt Connors. And to see an encounter like that where you're going up against both Lizard and Scream, for example, would be a really difficult challenge for us to have to overcome as Spider-Man. And that could be a cool way for Insomniac to come full circle, where they've really improved the spectacle and set pieces surrounding these boss fights and evolved that by adding back in that original idea of having multiple bosses to take on at the same time.
Especially if that means ending up fighting characters like Green Goblin and Doc Ock simultaneously, with both Peter and Miles taking them on individually. That would create some incredible combat opportunities for some dynamic boss fights that we haven't really seen the major scope of just yet within this franchise. But based on where Marvel's Spider-Man 2 ended and what they were able to accomplish within that game, I have no doubt that they're going to once again up their game by the time Marvel's Spider-Man 3 releases. So the next major pillar of gameplay that we wanted to talk about for Marvel's Spider-Man 3 is pretty much what every open world Spider-Man game lives and breathes on, and that of course is the game's traversal system. Now, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 already did a phenomenal job improving upon the initial web swinging mechanics that Marvel's Spider-Man 1 showcased, as well as the more refined swinging that we got in Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. But in Marvel's Spider-Man 2, that is pretty much the definitive open world Spider-Man game to swing around in ever since Spider-Man 2, the movie tie-in game, and even Spider-Man Web of Shadows. In Marvel's Spider-Man 2, we have unlimited open world traversal options with that of the web wings, loop-de-loops, corner tethering, slingshotting, super slingshotting. We're also able to glide upon water if you're going fast enough across the New York Sea line, and just pulling off insanely stylish tricks as both Peter and Miles. So it's kind of hard to think about how exactly Insomniac can refine this formula even more within Marvel's Spider-Man 3. but we still have some ideas on what they could potentially incorporate.
Insomniac has had an interesting challenge of bringing the Spider-Man gameplay of web swinging in an open world to a more polished, current generation experience. Back in 2004, when we got Spider-Man 2 and it was the first open world Spider-Man game, there was a lot of control at the player's disposal. You could swing around on flagpoles, you could control your swing speed, you could run up walls if you had enough momentum. There were some air tricks involved there too, but there was also a distinct lack of polish. There was always the chance that you were going to swing face first into a building and lose all of your momentum. And Insomniac has found ways to counter that, and in their first game, that was at the expense of player control. While there were still some cool moves you could pull off, the swinging felt largely automated. And in Spider-Man 2, the addition of web wings and the addition of air tricks in Miles Morales have made the swinging feel increasingly more precise, but also more controlled by the player. In Spider-Man 3, I'd like to see an even deeper step into that, where we get to see even a little bit more options available to the player in regards to how they choose to traverse the city.
And I, for one, think that one of the biggest refinements within the web swinging system that Insomniac could add is just making it more fluid. It's already beyond fluid in Marvel's Spider-Man 2, but there are a couple nitpicks that people have had with the system, especially if you look into the swing assist option, where in the game's main menu, you can choose to have the swing assist option all the way at max at level 10, which pretty much feels like how the web swinging was back in Marvel's Spider-Man 1, where it does feel a little bit floaty in a sense, and you are able to directly steer wherever Spider-Man is going. If you do put the meter all the way at 0, you will feel a bit more physics-based swinging in the sense that it will be a bit harder to control Spider-Man's momentum, and if you don't shoot out your web line right before you hit the ground, you will in fact swing towards the ground and immediately cancel your swing. But because of the fact that that fluidity is canceled if you do hit the ground, that is one element that Insomniac could update, especially considering that we've already seen this gameplay mechanic incorporated in previous open world Spider-Man games. And in this case, I am referring to having the ability of running on the ground while you are still web swinging. While this might seem like a very minor detail, this has actually been a huge defining factor of some of the previous open world Spider-Man games, like Spider-Man 2, the movie tie-in game, and especially Spider-Man Web of Shadows. So being able to make this fluid web swinging system even more polished by making players feel even more skilled right before they pull off a web swing, especially if they have fall damage turned on, is going to make that satisfaction even bigger by the time they fully master the swinging system. Which is also why I think we could see the return of one of my personal favorite web swinging systems of all time, which actually popped up in the Spider-Man 3 movie tie-in game of dual swinging. This is where you press both R2 and L2 at the same time to simultaneously shoot out two separate web lines. Now, while this might not seem like anything too major in the grand scheme of things, it does add a bit more personality to how you want to swing around the city as Spider-Man, which also allows for different potentials when it comes to air tricks, and also have that potential to slingshot while in mid-air instead of only being restricted to the ground, would also add, again, even more player variety and options when it does come to making you feel like you can do everything a spider can. And last but not least, everybody, we do have the very final pillar that we can see be improved within Marvel's Spider-Man 3 for its gameplay, and that does actually relate to its core narrative implementation with the story. While Marvel's Spider-Man 2 did have a lot of different mission variety when it did come to playing as Peter, Miles, MJ, even Haley, and especially Venom, there are still aspects about the main missions, the side missions, as well as the various collectibles that we can find scattered throughout the city that could have been majorly benefited from a bit more narrative connection to what the game's core story actually was. There's also a big factor in this case that relates to the pacing of the game, where you do switch back and forth from this very high-octane action set pieces with playing as Spider-Man to a bit more slower and less exciting missions where you get more personal with the characters, like playing as Peter, going to Coney Island with MJ and Harry, or even playing as Miles to attend a music museum for his mom. And while I do thoroughly love those missions, which give more narrative insights to the characters and their journeys, there is still a lot that Insomniac can do to refine these aspects of the game even further.
I would like to see an emphasis on narrative, and while Insomniac has done a great job of keeping the narrative at the forefront, there have been side missions and missions where you play as MJ or unpowered characters that haven't felt like they fit the progression of the story particularly well. And while in Spider-Man 2, I think there was a lot of evolution in how these side missions played out by tying them to a friendly neighborhood app, which was introduced in Miles Morales. We were able to see a lot of really compelling stories told throughout the main story and the open world. The Howard mission and the Find Grandpa mission are the two that stick out to me the most, but there were some other fun ones too, like Photo Help, where you get to play as a young Peter Parker selling his first photo to J. Jonah Jameson. Personally, I'd like to see an expansion of the friendly neighborhood system. I'd like to see even more missions there, some of them very story-driven and hard-hitting emotionally, but I'd also like to see more everyday stories take place that we get to help with. It could even be cool to see Insomniac go as far as to basically do a reverse nemesis system, where we see some kind of procedurally generated system for civilians, and maybe as you're walking around New York City, civilians can call out events that they've been part of in the past. I would just like to see more cohesion in the side missions and the main story, whether it be to help set up the main plot because there's a side mission that sets up the main threat better, or it helps establish the characters more and gives them more development, similar to how we saw with the Photo Help mission, where we got a little bit more development for Peter Parker, or the music side mission for Miles Morales. As far as missions with characters like MJ go, similarly, I'd really like these, if they're still included, to only be included if they serve a purpose to the story or the characters. I don't really want to play as MJ just walking around and taking photos of miscellaneous things, but I would be interested in playing as MJ if it's a chase sequence with the Green Goblin where I'm running away and trying to take cover so that he doesn't see me. That could be a really interesting, intense moment. Or I'd also be interested in playing as Peter Parker walking around Midtown High to help set up a high school reunion or something. I feel that sometimes making some of these things more based on the choice of the players rather than integral to the story, where it can sometimes hurt the pacing, would make me more inclined to visit them so that I can see all of these hidden interactions and have encounters with characters that I'd otherwise not get to see in this universe. Overall, I feel that based on the story, we could see a lot more done in the open world, and creating an open world that is built toward developing these characters even further. I'd like to see chases where you get to race other Spider-Men or other superpowered characters. I'd like to see moments where we get to encounter a character perhaps from our previous game that isn't part of the main story but has a continued arc in Spider-Man 3.
One of the biggest improvements that Insomniac made with the side missions for Marvel's Spider-Man 2, while there were a few hits and misses, like the one that involved trying to find a robot dog for a blind lady, or simply taking someone who banged a firework in his face to the hospital, we did get really thoroughly detailed side missions like that of finding Grandpa or the Howard side missions, as well as the multi-layered side missions that had their own individual narrative arcs take place. Primarily with that of the Flame side mission that featured Peter and Yuri as the Wraith teaming up to go after the Flame, who we later discover as a big tease for the future games to be the one and only Cletus Cassidy, who eventually will become Carnage. And the same also goes for the Talon Drone side missions, where we also end up discovering that it was Chameleon that ended up being scanned and is now let loose in the city, who will probably come back to bite Spider-Man in the butt. I would love to see more of these side missions occur within the core narrative of Marvel's Spider-Man 3, possibly have a story of Peter reflecting reflecting about his time wearing the black suit and how Peter might still be trying to resolve the inner turmoil that he was facing while fighting Harry as Venom. I would also like to see some of the game's open world collectibles be more personal to our main heroes. The ones that we saw in Spider-Man PS4 with the backpacks were great because we received a more direct insight as to who exactly this Peter is and what his background was. The same notion applies to Miles Morales' game where we collected the time capsules, which did put a bigger influence to Miles and Finn's relationship as them being best friends. But within Marvel's Spider-Man 2, the main collectibles that we got throughout the city this time around were the Spider Bots. Now, while it was fun in that side mission to receive a small tease of the existence of the Spider-Verse and Miguel O'Hara himself, it didn't necessarily relate to the core story that was taking place in the game relating to the symbiote as well as Harry becoming Venom. So by the time we see Marvel's Spider-Man 3 in action, we should definitely receive a lot more personal and meaningful side missions that not only showcase the big supporting cast that is featured for both of our respective characters with Peter and Miles, but also showcase narratives of what makes them heroes in the first place.
You're absolutely right, and I think that we're both in agreement that narrative, whether it's character development or story development, need to be the forefront of every activity and mission that you do, whether it be in the main story or in the open world. I think there's so much that they could do on this front. In Spider-Man 2 from 2004, we got the pizza delivery mission, which basically hid race challenges behind the story of Peter having to hold a job. Personally, I'd like to see more things like this in Spider-Man 3, as opposed to open world activities that just feel like filler content. And while I do think each of Insomniac's games have improved on this front and become more and more interesting as time has gone on, I still think there is some room for improvement here. And as far as the open world goes, I'd just like to see more variety. I'd like to see more variety in the crimes. I'd like to see more variety in things that we can do. I'd like to see interesting enemy types that take a lot of effort to take down. I'd like to see some synergy between the Peter Parker gameplay and the Spider-Man gameplay. It would be cool to go and collect research tokens out in the city and then take them back to the startup Emily May Foundation in his garage and use them to upgrade our gear and gadgets so that it completely influences the gameplay of the combat and the traversal. Overall, I think that there's a lot that Insomniac can do to make this the ultimately definitive Spider-Man experience.
And for all we know, by the time that Marvel's Spider-Man 3 releases, it could very well end up being a cross-gen game for both the PS5 and a potential PlayStation 6. But we're just gonna have to wait and see, let Insomniac cook, and hope for the absolute best by the time this potential finale of their Spider-Man franchise releases. But with all that said, everybody, that's the video that Irogen and I have for you today, and please let us know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What, in your opinion, would make Marvel's Spider-Man 3 a 10 out of 10 game? Would it be different enemy types, a bigger open world ranging all the way to the Bronx, possibly being able to play as even more Spider-Man villains like we got with Venom, but this time with Green Goblin and maybe Doc Ock, better side missions, no more MJ missions, whatever you think, let us know in the comment section down below, and thank you once again to the one and only Irogen for joining me in this video, because without him, it wouldn't be possible. Thank you so much, dude. I had a wonderful time.
I did as well. Thank you so much for having me on. We'll have to do it again soon.
And until next time, true believers, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans, and peace out.